Oh, okay, my name is Dave Vandegrift, and from 1965 to 1967 I was a TEFL teacher teaching English in a Turkish middle school in central eastern Turkey in a tiny town called Pulimur. One of the perks that the Peace Corps provided for volunteers, especially in isolated sites like mine, was to receive the Paris edition of the Herald Tribune by mail once a week. And I had been in my site for a month or so, and several times children had asked me if I worked for the CIA. Now, the children wouldn't know about the CIA on their own, so it meant that the adults in the town, the leaders in the town, were wondering whether I was really part of the CIA, and I was the first American that they had gotten acquainted with. However, they also knew that there was a Nike missile site somewhere on the mountain behind the village because they had seen American military people coming and going at night, or they knew that helicopters supplied this missile site, but no one in town ever had seen the Americans up close and personal, and I was the first one. So this was all a bit confusing as I was trying to get started with school, and one day I got the Herald Tribune, and there was an article, a review of an article in Ramparts magazine. And Ramparts magazine had discovered that Michigan State University, which was instrumental in the beginning of the Peace Corps, was actually training Peace Corps volunteers and CIA agents on the campus in the summertime at the same time. And it would be theoretically possible for these groups to meet each other. This sounded like something that should definitely not happen in the Peace Corps and not a wise choice on some planners' parts in the government. I then understood maybe why people were asking these questions if they got a hold of this kind of information, and it made my defense more difficult if this kind of information was out in the world, although my people didn't know about it locally. But I felt kind of betrayed, and although I wasn't trained at Michigan State University. So in my interest in doing something, I wrote a letter to the editor of the Herald Tribune explaining that I had been asked if I were a spy, and I thought that this was not a wise choice for the Peace Corps or the Foreign Service to do in choosing training sites. And I finished the article by saying, I no longer wonder why people ask me if I am a spy. I sent the letter off and I forgot about it until about 2 months later, when after school one day the principal called me to the office and he said, "Did you know that you are on the front page of Akşam newspaper," which was a leading left-wing newspaper in Turkey. And I said, "That's impossible. I'm just here in this town." He said, "No." He said, "There is a letter that you wrote to Paris, and it has been published on the front page of Akşam newspaper." And he showed me the newspaper, and there on the front page at the top, right under the banner headline, was a black box. And the Turkish newspaper had seen my letter, which was published in the Herald Tribune, and they had inverted the type and published it as a black letter with white writing and translated it very loosely and incorrectly. So my letter had finished by saying, "I no longer wonder why Turks ask me if I'm a spy," and it was translated into Turkish by this newspaper as, "Now I know why Turks think I am a spy." So the construction was different and made it seem as though I wondered if I really was a spy and I would be asked to cooperate. At that point I really became pretty sure that the Peace Corps rep would arrive in my village within the next week and tell me to pick up my bags and stick me in a Jeep and drive me to the nearest airport, and I would be on my way back to America because we'd been warned not to get involved in politics in any way. So I waited and taught my classes, and after a week or so the rep pulled into town with his Jeep, and he was sitting in the principal's office after school when I arrived. And I thought, oh boy, here it is, this is the end. And he said, well, actually, you're okay, because the left-wing newspaper is criticizing the United States, and that goes over well with the leftist element in Turkey. And you actually didn't participate in politics, and it obviously a non-planned thing on your part, so you're okay. And I was left in my sight for the rest of the year. My first experience with the CIA was just remote, because I had only written about it. I never felt I had any contact with people, but we had been warned not to talk to anyone about what Turks were doing, because especially other Americans, because that was none of their affair, and we didn't want to jeopardize the Peace Corps concept with our host country. About Thanksgiving of that year, the children in the school came and said that there were American servicemen in the local tea house, and that I should come and meet them and talk to them. I went and saw an American Air Force sergeant and two of his driver, and Turkish driver, and another fella. And he said that he was in the area scouting out a hunting party for some NATO generals who wanted to hunt ibex. Now, ibex is a native antelope with long horns that arc back over its head. And it is illegal to hunt these rare animals in Turkey, and so I knew immediately something wasn't quite right, because first, NATO generals should not be hunting animals that are illegal in Turkey, but I also knew that it might be possible because they could get special permits. The guy was friendly, and he invited me to come to Ankara, where he lived with his family, and to spend Thanksgiving with them if I needed a break.
Was this an American?
He was an American Air Force sergeant. I actually did need a break, because being the first American in this town, I was in the Goldfish Bowl 24 hours a day. Anytime I was out in public, everybody was looking at me and watching what I did. And I talked to my principal and explained that I would like a break. I'd also had very limited nutrition in the local. I was eating mostly beans and rice and the occasional goat knuckle and some potatoes. So I needed to get some other more nourishing food too, some dairy products, and there was not even yogurt available to me, or eggs. So the principal agreed that I should leave on a Wednesday. It would be a 24-hour train trip, and I would come back on Sunday. So I would have 3 days off school, and that was fine. So I went by train to Ankara. We had Thanksgiving dinner with the Air Force sergeant's family, and we talked and had some whiskey. Late in the evening, his family all went to bed, his wife and his children. He and I sat up and talked. And he said, you know, I have someone that would like to probably meet you. You have an interesting story out there in Eastern Turkey, living in this village by yourself. And he said, why don't I give him a call? And he sometimes stays up late. So he made the phone call, and he said, yeah, I call him Uncle Joe, and you can call him that too. He'd like to meet you. So we got in the Jeep about, I don't know, 11 o'clock at night or 11:30, and drove across the city to Uncle Joe's apartment, which was a beautiful apartment, very large, roomy, had Turkish carpets everywhere, and really nice artwork and copper pans. And this man had obviously been in Turkey for a while and collected some really nice things. So Joe began to talk to me, and he asked me where I was, and then he asked me if I knew about the American base nearby, and I said I had, and had I seen any of the soldiers, and I hadn't. And then from there he transferred over to the Turkish army, and where there was a Turkish army outpost in the town, and I began to feel a little strange at this point. And then he said, did I notice any Turkish troop movements on the road that went through the town? Because I was right on the Tigris River, and then there was a major, although it was a dirt road, major road from north to south in that part of Turkey. And then when he asked about Turkish troop movements, I felt very strange, and I wanted to end the conversation, and I said, well, I wasn't really sure because I was in school teaching, and I started making excuses not to provide more information. He let it go, and then a couple of times while we were there, he came back and asked more kind of specific questions about people in the town and the Turkish government in the area. And then he said, well, do you see many other visitors? Are there many Iranians coming through the town, and other Germans or other nationalities? And again, I got this strange feeling, so I tried to answer briefly and not provide much information. And I was really glad to leave. But I didn't quite know what to make of this conversation. I just knew it made me uncomfortable. We went back and got back maybe at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I put my sleeping bag out and just had this rolling around in my head for an hour before I could go to sleep. Another volunteer had come with me, and we didn't say anything. We both just went to sleep. The next day I found out that he also had thought this was a bit strange, and he didn't go to sleep for a while, but neither of us knew it till the next day. So the next day was Friday, and we spent the day with the family, and they asked us if we wanted anything from the PX, and we gave them a few requests, and they provided some candy and some cigarettes that we would give as gifts when we got back to our villages. And we had dinner that night with the family, and we're leaving the next day, and blow me down, 11:30 at night, the host says, you know what, Joe just called, and he invited us back over tonight. Let's go back, and he's got another whiskey he'd like you to taste. So Mike and I kind of looked at each other and rolled our eyes, but these were our hosts and they'd been really nice to us. So we said, okay, all right, we'll go. And we returned to Uncle Joe's, and pretty soon the conversation again got around particularly to me and asking similar questions about the Turkish military, but also to Mike, who was living with a Turkish officer who had been assigned in his town, and he asked Mike questions about the Turkish military too. And we both wanted to end the conversation. We felt really uncomfortable, and we did. Finally, we got back that night, went to sleep again in the dark living room in our sleeping bags. And after we'd been lying there and I was thinking again, Mike said, well, what do you make of Uncle Joe? And I said, I don't know, I think it's CIA. He said, yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And so we broke the contact. We didn't contact the Turkish Air Force sergeant again, didn't accept any other hospitality from him, and that was the end of that story.